The roar of Sergeant Blake Anderson's voice echoed across the confidence course at 6:30 a.m., causing all 30 recruits assembled in formation to flinch involuntarily. "You think you're qualified to tell me how to do my job?" Anderson stepped closer to Hannah Foster, the maintenance worker, who was inspecting the safety equipment on the 20-foot climbing wall. The morning sun cast long shadows across Camp Pendleton's training ground, highlighting the stark contrast between the two figures facing each other. Hannah didn't respond immediately. Instead, she pointed to a frayed rope at the 15-foot mark, the exact spot where Anderson had just told the recruits they didn't need to check. The rope's inner fibers were visible through the fierce-worn exterior, a clear safety hazard that could snap under the weight of a climbing Marine. She stood barely 5 feet 6 inches tall, drowning in oversized maintenance coveralls that made her appear even smaller. Her blonde hair was pulled back in a tight bun, revealing a face that looked too young and delicate for the harsh military environment surrounding her. Anderson towered over her at 6 feet 2 inches, his muscles rippling beneath his perfectly pressed Marine Corps uniform. Behind him, Corporal Mason Gray and Private First Class Connor Hughes exchanged amused glances, already anticipating the entertainment about to unfold. The 30 recruits stood frozen in formation, none daring to break protocol by turning their heads, though their eyes tracked every movement of the confrontation developing before them. "I'm just doing my job, Sergeant," Hannah said quietly, her voice steady and calm despite the aggressive posture of the man looming over her. "Safety inspection is my responsibility." Anderson laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the morning air like a blade. He turned to look at his fellow instructors, ensuring he had an audience for what was about to happen. "Your responsibility is to clean up and fix things when we tell you to, not to teach Marines how to train." He stepped even closer, close enough that his breath disturbed the loose strands of hair framing her face. "Your maintenance staff. You push mops and tighten bolts. You don't have the qualification or the experience to question my training methods." The tension in the air was palpable. 30 recruits held their breath, watching this small woman stand her ground against one of Camp Pendleton's most intimidating drill instructors. What they didn't know, what none of them could have imagined, was that in the next 20 minutes, everything they thought they knew about the quiet maintenance worker would be shattered completely. Hannah's fingers moved along the rope with practiced precision, checking each wear point with movements that seemed almost automatic. The way she tested the tensile strength, the specific points she examined, the methodical pattern of her inspection, it all suggested something more than basic maintenance training. But Anderson was too focused on establishing dominance to notice these subtle details. "I've identified 3 additional safety hazards on this equipment," Hannah said, pulling out her inspection checklist. She used precise military terminology as she documented each issue, terminology that most civilian maintenance workers wouldn't know. "The primary anchor bolt shows metal fatigue at the stress point. The backup safety line has UV damage that's compromised its integrity by approximately 40%. The platform support beam has a hairline crack that wasn't there during last week's inspection." Gray stepped forward, his stocky frame casting a shadow over Hannah's clipboard. "Listen to her, trying to sound all technical," he mocked, his voice pitched high in a poor imitation of Hannah's softer tone. "Maybe she learned some big words from a manual. Doesn't mean she knows what she's talking about." Among the recruits, Private First Class Ethan Bradley leaned slightly toward the Marine next to him and whispered, "Who is she anyway? I've seen her around for weeks, but nobody seems to know anything about her." The recruit beside him shrugged minutely, careful not to draw attention from the instructors. "Just maintenance. She's here every morning before we arrive, always checking equipment, never says much to anyone." Hannah continued her inspection, seemingly oblivious to the mockery. Her body language remained relaxed but alert, weight slightly shifted to her left leg in a stance that would be recognized by anyone with combat training as a defensive position that allowed for quick movement in any direction. She made another notation on her clipboard, and as she did, her sleeve rode up slightly, revealing the edge of what looked like an old scar on her forearm. "That platform could fail under stress," Hannah said, still maintaining her professional tone. "If one of these recruits falls from 20 feet because of equipment failure, that's not just an injury report. That's a career-ending investigation for everyone involved in this training evolution." Anderson's face flushed red, the veins in his neck becoming visible as his anger rose. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm stating facts," Hannah replied calmly. "My job is to ensure equipment safety. Your job is to train Marines. Both are important. Neither should compromise the other." Before we continue with this intense confrontation, tell me, where are you watching from today? Are you a veteran, active duty, or someone who appreciates stories about those who serve? Drop your location in the comments below, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more incredible military stories that remind us why we should never judge someone by their appearance. Hughes decided to escalate the situation, moving around to Hannah's other side to create a semicircle of intimidation. He accidentally knocked over his water bottle, sending its contents splashing across Hannah's clipboard and documentation. "Oops," he said with false innocence. "Clumsy me." In a movement so fast that most observers missed it entirely, Hannah's hand shot out and caught the clipboard before it could fall, simultaneously stepping back to avoid the worst of the spilled water. The speed and precision of her reflexes were extraordinary, the kind of muscle memory developed through years of high-stakes training. Several recruits noticed, and a murmur rippled through the formation before quickly dying under Anderson's glare. "Enough games," Anderson declared, his voice dropping to a dangerous level. "You want to question my training methods? Fine. Prove you know what you're talking about. Complete this obstacle course yourself. Show these recruits that you're qualified to judge how they should be trained." Hannah looked up from her clipboard, meeting Anderson's eyes for the first time. "That's not necessary, Sergeant. I'm not here to prove anything." "Of course you're not," Gray interjected with a sneer, "because you can't. It's easy to criticize from the sidelines when you've never had to actually perform." Corporal Ashley Coleman arrived on scene, having heard the commotion from the adjacent training area. She was known throughout the base as one of the toughest female Marines, someone who had earned respect through sheer determination and physical prowess. She looked at Hannah with undisguised disdain. "What's this? Maintenance thinks they can do our job better?" "She's identified some safety concerns," Staff Sergeant Ryan Carter said as he approached the group. Carter was older, more experienced, and generally served as a voice of reason among the training staff. However, even his tone carried skepticism as he addressed Hannah. "But perhaps you should leave the actual training to those of us who've earned the right to wear this uniform in a combat capacity." Hannah stood quietly, surrounded by hostile faces, her small frame dwarfed by the circle of Marines closing in around her. She rolled her shoulders slightly, a subtle movement that seemed more like stretching than preparation, though anyone paying close attention might have noticed how it positioned her for maximum mobility. 10 minutes, Anderson announced loudly, ensuring all the recruits could hear. "If you can complete this obstacle course in 10 minutes, I'll consider your safety concerns. If not, you apologize to every Marine here for wasting our time and questioning our methods." The recruits stirred with excitement. The confidence course was brutal, designed to push Marines to their physical and mental limits. The standard completion time for a trained Marine was 12 to 15 minutes. For a civilian maintenance worker, especially a woman of Hannah's small stature, 10 minutes seemed impossible. Hannah set down her clipboard carefully, placing it on a nearby equipment box. She removed her oversized maintenance jacket, folding it with precise military corners before setting it aside. Underneath, she wore a simple gray t-shirt that revealed arms more toned than anyone had expected. The definition in her muscles wasn't bulky, but rather the lean, functional strength of someone who trained for performance rather than appearance. As she approached the starting line, Hannah's entire demeanor shifted subtly. Her shoulders squared, her breathing deepened and regulated, and her eyes took on a focused intensity that transformed her from an unassuming maintenance worker into something else entirely. She examined the first obstacle, the 20-foot rope climb, with an analytical gaze that cataloged every handhold, every potential point of leverage. Private Logan Foster, standing in the front row of recruits, noticed something in the way Hannah positioned her hands on the rope. "That's," he started to whisper, then caught himself. But the recruit next to him had seen it too, the specific grip pattern taught only in advanced military operations training. Hannah began to climb, and the difference was immediately apparent. Where recruits typically struggled with the rope, using raw strength to pull themselves up, Hannah's technique was flawless. She used her legs efficiently, her body moving in a rhythm that conserved energy while maintaining steady upward progress. She reached the top in 12 seconds, less than half the time it took most recruits. The laughter and mockery died away as Hannah transitioned to the next obstacle. The balance beam, set 8 feet off the ground, typically caused recruits to slow down as they fought to maintain stability. Hannah crossed it in a smooth, gliding motion, her arms barely extended for balance, her footwork precise and confident. Gray's smirk began to fade. Hughes took an unconscious step backward. Coleman's expression shifted from disdain to confusion. Something was very wrong with their assumptions about this maintenance worker. The horizontal ladder came next, requiring upper body strength that most assumed Hannah wouldn't possess. She swung across it, using a technique that maximized momentum while minimizing effort, her body moving with the fluid grace of someone who had done this thousands of times before. As she moved, her t-shirt rode up slightly, revealing the edge of what looked like shrapnel scarring along her lower back. Carter pulled out his phone, discreetly typing something into a personnel database. His expression grew increasingly troubled as he read whatever came up on his screen. Hannah approached the wall obstacle, a sheer 8-foot vertical surface that required either a running jump or assistance from teammates to overcome. Without hesitation, she hit it at exactly the right angle, using her momentum to carry her up and over in one fluid motion. The technique was perfect. Textbook special operations training, the kind taught only in elite military schools. "What the hell?" Anderson muttered, his bravado beginning to crack. Among the recruits, Private First Class Julia Hayes had pulled out her phone and was discreetly searching for female Marine obstacle course records. Her eyes widened as she found something, quickly showing it to the recruit beside her. The information spread through the whispered exchanges, creating a buzz of excitement and confusion. Hannah reached the cargo net, a 30-foot climb that exhausted most recruits. She ascended it with mechanical precision, her movements economical and controlled. Halfway up, her foot slipped on a wet section of rope. For a moment, she hung by one hand, 30 recruits gasping in unison. Then, with a display of raw strength that seemed impossible for her size, she pulled herself up one-handed and continued climbing as if nothing had happened. Coleman turned to Anderson. "That's not possible. That's not... Who is she?" Anderson's face had gone pale, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. He looked at Carter, who was still staring at his phone screen with an expression of growing alarm. Hannah completed the traverse rope, hand over hand for 30 feet, in 23 seconds. The burning in her muscles didn't show on her face, which remained focused and determined. As she moved, her technique became increasingly apparent to anyone with advanced training. This wasn't just military precision. This was special operations-level skill. Logan Foster couldn't contain himself any longer. "That's MARSOC technique," he whispered urgently to the recruit beside him. "That specific grip transition. They only teach that in Marine Special Operations Command training." The whisper spread through the ranks like wildfire. MARSOC, Marine Special Operations, Elite Forces. The maintenance worker? Hannah dropped from the rope and sprinted toward the final series of obstacles. The tire run, where recruits typically stumbled through a field of tires, she navigated with the agility of a dancer, her feet finding the center of each tire without looking down. The low crawl under barbed wire, which usually took recruits 45 seconds of careful maneuvering, she completed in 15 seconds, using a technique that kept her body impossibly low while maintaining forward speed. Anderson started forward as if to intervene, but Carter grabbed his arm. "Wait," Carter said quietly, showing him his phone screen. Anderson's eyes widened, and he took an involuntary step backward. The final obstacle was another wall, this one 12 feet high with a rope on one side. Hannah hit it running, using her momentum to reach halfway up before even touching the rope. She pulled herself over and dropped down the other side in a controlled fall that turned into a forward roll, coming up running for the finish line. She crossed it at 4 minutes and 12 seconds. The silence that followed was absolute. 30 recruits stood frozen in formation, their minds trying to process what they had just witnessed. The instructors stood in various states of shock, their worldview shattered by the impossible performance they had just witnessed. Hannah walked back toward them, not even breathing hard, though a light sheen of sweat covered her face. She stopped in front of Anderson, who seemed to have shrunk several inches in the last 4 minutes. "About those safety concerns," Hannah said quietly, her voice carrying the same calm professionalism as before. "Will you be addressing them, or should I file a formal report?" Anderson's mouth opened and closed without sound. His face had gone from red to white and was now approaching an unhealthy gray. Behind him, Gray and Hughes looked like they wanted to disappear into the ground. Coleman stood with her arms crossed, her expression a mixture of respect and bewilderment. Carter cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said, the honorific slipping out unconsciously. "That time, 4 minutes, 12 seconds. That's..." "A new base record," came a voice from behind them. Everyone turned to see Gunnery Sergeant Aaron Mitchell approaching with a tablet in his hand. "I've been tracking course times for 15 years. The previous record was 5 minutes 43 seconds, set by a Force Recon operator in 2009. The implications hit everyone simultaneously. Hannah had just destroyed a record set by Special Forces, beating it by over 90 seconds. This wasn't just competence. This was elite performance at the highest level. Anderson finally found his voice, though it cracked with stress. "Who are you?" Hannah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked back to where she had left her maintenance jacket. As she picked it up, the movement caused her t-shirt to shift, revealing more of the scarring on her back, distinctive patterns that any combat veteran would recognize as shrapnel wounds from an IED. "I'm someone who takes safety seriously," Hannah said finally, pulling her jacket back on. "Those equipment failures I identified aren't theoretical. I've seen what happens when gear fails in combat. I've seen Marines die because someone didn't check a rope, didn't test an anchor point, didn't notice metal fatigue." Her voice remained quiet, but something in it had changed. There was a weight to her words now, the kind that came from lived experience rather than training manuals. Private Adam Fox, one of the younger recruits, raised his hand tentatively. "Ma'am, were you in combat?" Hannah looked at him, and for just a moment, something flickered in her eyes, a depth of experience and pain that made everyone present unconsciously straighten their posture. "That's not relevant to today's safety inspection," she said quietly. "What's relevant is that your sergeant needs to replace that rope before someone gets hurt." Anderson's ego finally overcame his shock. "Now wait just a minute. You don't get to come here and—" He reached out to grab Hannah's arm, presumably to turn her to face him. It was a mistake. Hannah's reaction was instantaneous and devastating. She deflected his grab with her left hand while simultaneously stepping inside his reach. Her right hand came up in what would have been a palm strike to his solar plexus, stopping just short of contact. The entire movement took less than half a second, and Anderson found himself off balance and vulnerable before his brain had even processed that she had moved. She stepped back immediately, hands visible and non-threatening, but the message was clear. She could have put us out on the ground if she had chosen to. The 30 recruits were no longer even pretending to maintain formation. They stared openly, phones appearing in several hands to capture what was happening. This was going to be all over Camp Pendleton within hours. "That's assault," Anderson sputtered, trying to regain some authority. "You just assaulted a Marine NCO." "I defended myself against unwanted physical contact," Hannah corrected calmly. "Article 92 of the UCMJ is quite clear about the right to self-defense, even for civilian contractors." The fact that she could quote the Uniform Code of Military Justice added another layer to the mystery. Maintenance workers didn't typically memorize military law. Coleman stepped forward, her earlier disdain replaced with genuine curiosity. "That technique, that was Fleet Marine Force combatives, but more than that. That was advanced, specialized training." Hannah said nothing, simply continuing to put on her jacket with deliberate calm. Carter's phone rang. He answered it, listened for a moment, and his face went completely white. "Yes, sir. She's here, sir. Yes, sir. Immediately, sir." He ended the call and looked at Hannah with an expression of dawning realization mixed with fear. "That was personnel. They want to see all of us, now." Anderson tried to reassert control. "Good. We'll get this sorted out. This woman is clearly—" "Sergeant Anderson," Carter interrupted, his voice strange. "The call wasn't from base personnel. It was from Pentagon personnel, and they didn't want to see her." He paused, swallowing hard. "They want to see us. About her." The group began walking toward the administrative building, the recruits dismissed but clearly reluctant to leave. Several lingered, recording with their phones, as the instructors surrounded Hannah like an escort. Or, perhaps more accurately, like suspects being brought in for questioning. As they walked, Logan Foster called out impulsively, "Ma'am, that grip technique on the traverse rope, that's Ghost Team protocol, isn't it?" Hannah stopped walking. The instructor stopped with her, everyone freezing in place at the mention of Ghost Team. It was a designation most Marines had only heard in whispers, elite operators so classified that their existence was officially denied. Hannah turned slowly to look at Logan. "Where did you hear that term, Private?" "My older brother, ma'am. He was in Afghanistan in 2013. His unit was pinned down in Helmand Province. He said Ghost Team 7 saved them. Said the team leader was—" He trailed off, his eyes widening as pieces clicked into place. Ghost Team 7 was wiped out in 2014, Anderson said dismissively, though his voice lacked conviction. Operation Crimson Dawn. No survivors. No confirmed survivors, Hannah corrected quietly. There's a difference. The blood drained from Anderson's face. You can't be. Before anyone could respond, a black SUV pulled up to the group. The door opened, and Commandant Samuel Fletcher stepped out. The Commandant of Camp Pendleton, a man who rarely involved himself in day-to-day training operations, was here in person. Everyone snapped to attention except Hannah, who, as a civilian contractor, was not required to. But something in her posture shifted, an unconscious straightening that spoke of deeply ingrained military bearing. Fletcher looked at the group, his eyes lingering on Hannah. "At ease," he said to the Marines, then addressed Hannah directly. "Ms. Foster, I understand there's been an incident." The use of her last name sent another shock through the group. They had all assumed her name tag reading H. Foster meant something common like Helen or Heather, but now, with the context building around them, "Just a disagreement about safety protocols, sir," Hannah said, her voice neutral. Fletcher's eyes moved to Anderson and his expression hardened. "Sergeant, did you physically contact this woman?" Anderson's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. "Sir, there was a misunderstanding. Did you or did you not put your hands on her?" Fletcher's voice was ice. "I may have reached for her arms, sir, but—" Fletcher turned back to Hannah. "Do you wish to file a complaint?" "No, sir. The sergeant was just passionate about his training methods. No harm was done." The Commandant studied her for a long moment, something unreadable in his expression. "Walk with me, Ms. Foster." It wasn't a request. Hannah fell into step beside him, leaving the stunned group of instructors behind. As they walked away, everyone could see Fletcher lean in and say something quietly to Hannah. Her response was inaudible, but Fletcher nodded and placed a hand briefly on her shoulder, a gesture of familiarity and respect that left the watching Marines speechless. Anderson turned to Carter, his face twisted with confusion and growing dread. "What just happened? Who is she?" Carter was still staring at his phone, cross-referencing something he had found in the personnel database with public military records. "Oh my God," he whispered. "Hannah Foster. Master Sergeant Hannah Foster. Ghost Team 7. "That's impossible," Gray protested weakly. "Ghost Team 7 was all male. Everyone knows that." "Everyone assumed that," Carter corrected, his voice hollow, "because the records were so classified. But look," he showed them his phone screen. "Medal citations, public record, but nobody connected them because the name was so common. Silver Star, Navy Cross, 3 Bronze Stars. All awarded to H. Foster, Marine Special Operations Command. The citations are heavily redacted, but the dates, they match Ghost Team 7 operations." Coleman grabbed the phone, reading rapidly. "Helmand Province, August 2013. Extraordinary heroism in conducting a rescue operation of 12 Marines under heavy fire. That's the operation Logan's brother mentioned." "This can't be real," Hughes said desperately. "She's maintenance. She mops floors." Anderson's legs seemed to give out, and he sat heavily on a nearby bench. "I grabbed her. I put my hands on a decorated special operations veteran. I'm dead. My career is over." Meanwhile, Hannah walked beside the Commandant in silence until they reached a quiet area away from prying eyes. Fletcher stopped and turned to face her. "Hannah," he said quietly, using her first name now that they were alone. "I didn't expect to see you here. Last I heard, you were in Wyoming, completely off the grid." "Plans change, sir," Hannah replied. "Sometimes the civilian world is harder to navigate than a combat zone." Fletcher's expression softened. "You saved my life. You saved 12 of my Marines. And this is how you're treated on my base?" His jaw clenched. "Those instructors were doing their job as they saw it," Hannah interrupted. "They couldn't have known." "You're defending them after how they treated you?" Hannah shrugged slightly. "They're Marines, sir. Good ones, probably. Just a little too focused on the hierarchy to see past the maintenance uniform." Fletcher shook his head. "Same Hannah. Always protecting others, even when they don't deserve it." He paused. "What really brings you to Pendleton? And don't tell me it's the maintenance job." Hannah was quiet for a moment, looking out across the base. "Recovery, sir. The kind that doesn't show up on medical reports." Fletcher nodded slowly. "The invisible wounds. Something like that. You know, I have to ask, what happened with Ghost Team 7? The official report. The official report is what it needs to be, Hannah cut him off gently. Some stories don't need to be told, sir. Fletcher studied her for a long moment. The 412 on the obstacle course. That's going to be base legend by noon. I got carried away, Hannah admitted. Anderson pushed the right buttons. The wrong buttons, you mean? Fletcher smiled slightly. Though I would have paid good money to see his face when you crossed that finish line. They turned and began walking back toward where the instructors waited. As they approached, Hannah could see Anderson literally trembling. Gray and Hughes looked like they wanted to run. Coleman stood at attention, her expression one of profound respect. Carter seemed to be trying to process everything he had learned. Fletcher addressed the group formally. Gentlemen, Ms. Coleman, I believe you owe Ms. Foster an apology. Anderson stepped forward immediately, his voice shaking. Ma'am, I'm so sorry. I had no idea. I never would have, your service, what you've done. He was falling apart, words tumbling over each other. Hannah held up a hand, stopping him. Sergeant Anderson, you didn't know. How could you? I'm just maintenance staff. She looked at each of them in turn. But maybe that's the lesson here. You never know who someone really is, what they've done, what they've survived. That recruit you're yelling at might save your life someday. That maintenance worker might have more combat experience than your entire training staff combined. She turned to the recruits who had crept back to watch, unable to resist witnessing the conclusion of this unprecedented event. Every person on this base, from the newest recruit to the civilian contractors, deserves respect, not because of their rank or their history, but because they're human beings doing their job. Logan Foster called out, Ma'am, were you really Ghost Team 7? Before Hannah could respond, Fletcher spoke. Master Sergeant Hannah Foster was one of the most decorated Marines in MARSOC history. Her team conducted 43 high-risk operations over 3 years. She personally saved my life and the lives of 12 Marines under my command in Helmand Province. He paused, his voice growing heavy with emotion. She was declared MIA after Operation Crimson Dawn. The fact that she's standing here is nothing short of miraculous. Sir, Hannah said quietly, a note of warning in her voice. Fletcher nodded, understanding. Some stories weren't meant to be told. The point is, you've all learned something today about assumptions and respect. I trust you'll take that lesson to heart. Anderson found his voice again. Ma'am, the record, 412, that's incredible. Hannah shrugged. It was sloppy. I used to do it in 348. The statement hung in the air like a physical presence. 348. On an obstacle course that broke most Marines at 15 minutes. Why? Coleman asked suddenly. Why hide? Why work maintenance when you could be training these recruits? They could learn so much from you. Hannah looked at her for a long moment. Because real warriors don't need to advertise, Corporal. And sometimes the best thing a warrior can do is disappear. She turned to Fletcher. Sir, with your permission, I need to complete my safety inspection. That rope really does need to be replaced. Fletcher smiled slightly. Of course. Carry on, Ms. Foster. As Hannah walked back toward the obstacle course, Anderson called after her. Ma'am, could you possibly consider training some of our recruits, just occasionally? They could learn so much from someone with your experience. Hannah paused without turning around. I'm just maintenance, Sergeant, but if you ever need someone to check your safety equipment, she looked back over her shoulder with the hint of a smile. I'm usually here by 0500. The group watched her walk away, returning to her inspection duties as if nothing had happened. But everything had changed. Within hours, the story would spread throughout Camp Pendleton. The maintenance worker who destroyed the obstacle course record. The Ghost Team 7 operator who survived the impossible. The warrior who chose to hide in plain sight. Private Adam Fox, the young recruit who had asked about combat, approached Anderson tentatively. Sergeant, that thing she said about checking equipment because she'd seen Marines die, do you think she meant her team, Ghost Team 7? Anderson's expression was haunted. Operation Crimson Dawn was classified, but the rumors, they say the team was betrayed. Bad intel, equipment failures, everything that could go wrong did. If she survived that, he trailed off, unable to finish the thought. The magnitude of what Hannah Foster had survived, what she had chosen to walk away from, was beyond their comprehension. Carter's phone buzzed with a message. He read it, and his eyebrows shot up. Personnel just sent a base-wide communication, effective immediately. All safety inspections are to be given priority status. Any safety concerns identified by maintenance staff are to be addressed immediately. He looked up at the others. She didn't file a complaint, but Fletcher is making sure this never happens again. Coleman was staring at the obstacle course where Hannah was now meticulously checking each piece of equipment, making notes on her clipboard. 348, she muttered. She could do it in 348. That's not human. That's Ghost Team 7, Logan Foster said, having stayed close enough to hear. My brother said they weren't human. They were something else, shadows that struck from nowhere and disappeared without a trace. The morning sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the air and burning off the early fog. The recruits were beginning to reform for actual training, though their attention kept drifting to the small figure in maintenance coveralls, working methodically through her inspection routine. Anderson gathered his training staff. We're replacing that rope today, and any other equipment she flags. I don't care if it looks fine to us. If Hannah Foster says it needs to be replaced, it gets replaced. You're taking orders from maintenance now? Hughes asked, though his tone lacked any real challenge. Anderson looked at him steadily. I'm taking advice from someone who's forgotten more about combat than I'll ever know. And Hughes, you spilled water on a Navy Cross recipient. You might want to think about that. Hughes paled, the full weight of his actions finally hitting him. As the instructors dispersed to organize the delayed training, each carrying the weight of their newfound knowledge, Hannah continued her work. She had found 3 more safety issues, each one potentially catastrophic if left unaddressed. She documented them carefully, precisely, the same way she had once documented enemy positions and tactical assessments. Fletcher watched from his office window, having returned to the administrative building. His aide, Lieutenant Colonel Isaac Warren, stood beside him. Sir, should we offer her a position? With her experience, she doesn't want that, Fletcher interrupted. Hannah Foster has given enough. If she wants to spend her days checking ropes and tightening bolts, that's her choice. But make sure every person on this base knows that the maintenance staff are to be treated with absolute respect. Yes, sir. Sir, if I may ask, what really happened to Ghost Team 7? Fletcher was quiet for a long moment. Some missions go wrong, Colonel. Equipment fails, intelligence is bad, people make mistakes. Ghost Team 7 walked into hell because of other people's failures. The fact that Hannah walked out at all is a testament to who she is. He paused. But the cost. The cost was everything else. Down on the training ground, Hannah finished her inspection. She submitted her report electronically, flagging 6 critical safety issues that required immediate attention. Within minutes, she received confirmation that all 6 would be addressed before the afternoon training session. As she gathered her equipment to move to the next training area, Logan Foster approached her hesitantly. Ma'am, Ms. Foster? She turned to look at him, and he swallowed nervously under her steady gaze. My brother, he wanted me to thank you. He never knew who saved them that day. He's struggling with PTSD, has been since he got back. Maybe knowing it was you, knowing you made it out too, maybe that would help him. Hannah studied the young Marine for a long moment. Then she reached into her pocket and pulled out a challenge coin. It was worn, scratched, the edges smooth from handling. She pressed it into Logan's hand. Tell your brother that everyone who comes back is fighting battles nobody else can see. Tell him he's not alone. And tell him, she paused, something flickering in her eyes. Tell him that surviving is just the beginning. It's what you do with that survival that matters. Logan looked at the coin in his hand. It bore the Ghost Team 7 insignia, a skull wearing night vision goggles, surrounded by the words Umbra Mortis, Shadow of Death. Thank you, ma'am. This will mean everything to him. Hannah nodded and turned to continue her work, but Logan called after her. Ma'am, why maintenance? Really? She looked back at him. Because maintaining equipment is about preventing problems before they happen. It's about keeping people safe when they don't even know they're in danger. After years of reacting to threats, it's nice to prevent them instead. As she walked away, Logan stood holding the coin, watching the woman who had saved his brother disappear into the ordinary routine of base maintenance. Around him, training resumed with a new intensity. The instructors were sharper, more focused, constantly aware that somewhere on base, a ghost was watching. The story was already spreading beyond Camp Pendleton. Social media posts from the recruits who had witnessed the morning's events were going viral. Maintenance worker destroys Marine obstacle course record was trending, with shaky phone footage of Hannah's run spreading across military forums and websites. But Hannah didn't know about any of that. She was already at the next training area, inspecting rappelling equipment with the same meticulous attention she had once used to plan operations that would never appear in any history book. Anderson found himself at the obstacle course 2 hours later, watching a work crew replace the rope Hannah had flagged. The maintenance supervisor, an older civilian named Bill Crawford, oversaw the work. She was right, Crawford told Anderson. That rope was maybe a day or two from complete failure. Could have killed someone. Anderson felt a chill run down his spine. How did she know? It looked fine to me. Crawford shrugged. She's got an eye for it. Been here 6 months, found more safety issues than our entire team combined. We stopped questioning her after the first week. When Hannah Foster says something needs fixing, we fix it. 6 months, Anderson repeated. She's been here 6 months and nobody knew who she was. She's quiet, does her job, doesn't talk about herself. Perfect employee, really? Crawford paused. Though there was that one time. What time? About 2 months ago, some drunk Marine was harassing one of our younger female workers in the parking lot after hours. Hannah happened to be leaving late. The guy ended up unconscious, and Hannah drove the girl home. The Marine claimed 5 guys jumped him, but security footage showed it was just Hannah. It took her about 3 seconds to put him down. Anderson's respect for Hannah grew even more. And she didn't report it? Didn't make a big deal about it? Nope. Just made sure the girl was safe and came back to work the next day like nothing happened. That's Hannah. Hannah positioned herself at the base of the cargo net, 30 feet of rope mesh stretching above her like a vertical spider web. The morning sun had climbed higher now, casting her shadow long and dark against the ground. Every muscle in her body was coiled, ready for the final push that would either confirm or destroy the growing suspicions of everyone watching. Anderson stood frozen, his mind still processing what Carter had just shown him on the phone. The records, the citations, the dates that aligned too perfectly to be coincidence. His eyes tracked Hannah as she began her ascent, and now that he knew what to look for, the signs were everywhere. The way she distributed her weight across the ropes, never putting full strain on any single point. The rhythm of her climbing, 3 points of contact always maintained while the 4th reached for the next hold. This wasn't just competence. This was years of specialized training condensed into pure muscle memory. Look at her grip pattern, Logan Foster whispered urgently to the recruit beside him, unable to contain his recognition. That's not standard Marine training. That's advanced tactical climbing. They only teach that in MARSOC, Private Ethan Bradley finished, his voice barely audible. Marine Special Operations Command. The whisper rippled through the formation of recruits like electricity through water. MARSOC, the elite of the elite. The Marines who operated in shadows, whose missions were classified before they even began, and their maintenance worker was climbing with their techniques. Hannah reached the 15-foot mark in 12 seconds, her breathing controlled despite the burn beginning to build in her forearms. The cargo net swayed with her movement, but she compensated automatically, her body finding the net's rhythm and using it rather than fighting against it. Below her, she could hear the stunned silence of the watching crowd, feel the weight of their dawning realization. Gray stepped closer to Anderson, his voice tight with disbelief. This can't be real. MARSOC doesn't take women. Everyone knows that. Everyone assumes that, Carter corrected, still scrolling through his phone. The records are so classified that nobody really knows. We just assumed, God, we assumed so much. At 20 feet, Hannah's left hand suddenly slipped on a rope slick with morning dew. For a heart-stopping moment, she hung by one hand, her body swinging out from the net. 30 recruits gasped in unison, some starting forward instinctively before catching themselves. But before anyone could react further, Hannah demonstrated a display of pure upper body strength that should have been impossible for someone her size. With a controlled motion that defied physics, she pulled herself back to the net one-handed, her right arm bearing her entire body weight without visible strain. That's not possible, Coleman breathed, her own impressive fitness credentials suddenly feeling inadequate. The strength-to-weight ratio required for that is exactly what Special Operations trains for, Anderson finished, his voice hollow. Hannah continued climbing as if the near fall hadn't happened, reaching the 25-foot mark with the same mechanical precision she'd shown throughout. But something in the atmosphere had shifted. This wasn't just a skilled Marine showing off anymore. This was something else entirely, something that made the hair on the back of every neck stand up, with primitive recognition of an apex predator moving among them. Hughes found his voice, though it cracked with stress. If she's really special ops, why is she here? Why maintenance? Before anyone could answer, Hannah reached the top of the cargo net. But instead of immediately beginning her descent, she paused for a fraction of a second, scanning the area below with the kind of tactical assessment that had kept her alive through 18 months behind enemy lines. Her eyes cataloged every person, every potential threat, every escape route. It was automatic, unconscious, and absolutely unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for. The descent was even faster than the climb, Hannah's body flowing down the net like water finding the path of least resistance. She dropped the last 6 feet in a controlled fall that turned into a forward roll, coming up already running toward the finish line. She crossed it at exactly 4 minutes and 12 seconds. The silence that followed was absolute, broken only by the distant sound of a helicopter passing over the base. 30 recruits stood frozen in formation, their worldview fundamentally altered. The instructors remained in various states of shock, their assumptions about hierarchy, capability, and identity shattered beyond repair. Hannah walked back toward them with the same quiet composure she'd maintained throughout, though a light sheen of sweat now covered her face. She stopped directly in front of Anderson, whose face had gone from red to white to an unhealthy gray color that suggested impending medical distress. 4 minutes and 12 seconds, Gunnery Sergeant Mitchell said into the silence, his voice carrying the weight of historical significance. That's not just a base record. That's... He trailed off, unable to articulate what they'd just witnessed. That's impossible for someone who's just maintenance, Anderson said, his voice barely above a whisper. He looked at Hannah with eyes that held a mixture of fear, respect, and dawning horror at how badly he'd misjudged her. Who are you? Hannah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she walked back to where she'd left her maintenance jacket, picking it up with the same precise movements she'd used throughout her inspection. As she lifted it, the motion caused her t-shirt to shift, revealing more of the scarring on her back. Not just random wounds, but a specific pattern that any combat veteran would recognize. Shrapnel from an improvised explosive device, the kind that killed Marines every day in Afghanistan. I'm someone who takes her job seriously, Hannah said finally, her voice carrying an undertone that made everyone lean in unconsciously. Speaking of which, that rope on the 20-foot wall needs immediate replacement. The inner core is compromised. Anderson's frustration finally overcame his shock. That's all you have to say? You just destroyed a 15-year record, demonstrated special operations techniques, and all you care about is a rope? Hannah turned to look at him fully. And for the first time, Anderson saw what lay beneath her calm exterior. It was like looking into an abyss of experience that made his 3 years as a drill instructor feel like kindergarten. That rope will fail under load within the next 48 hours, Sergeant. When it does, whoever's climbing will fall 20 feet onto packed earth. Best case scenario, they break bones. Worst case, she didn't need to finish. But the record, Hughes started. Doesn't matter, Hannah cut him off. Records don't save lives. Proper equipment does. It was at that moment, with perfect dramatic timing that couldn't have been scripted better, that Anderson lost the last shred of his composure. The morning's humiliation, the shattering of his worldview, the frustration at being so completely outmatched, it all boiled over at once. Enough, he roared, stepping forward aggressively. I don't care who you were or what you've done. You're a civilian contractor on my training ground, and you will show proper respect. He reached out to grab Hannah's arm, intending to turn her to face him fully. It was a gesture of dominance, of authority reassertion, of masculine pride pushed beyond its breaking point. It was also the worst mistake of his military career. Hannah's reaction was instantaneous and devastating. Before Anderson's hand could close on her arm, she had pivoted inside his reach, her left hand deflecting his grab while her right came up in what would have been a palm strike to his solar plexus if she hadn't stopped it an inch from impact. The entire sequence took less than half a second, and Anderson found himself completely defenseless, her hand poised to deliver a strike that would have put him on the ground gasping for breath. But it was the controlled stop that was most impressive, the perfect discipline that kept the strike from landing, the absolute mastery that let her demonstrate capability without causing harm. She stepped back immediately, hands visible and non-threatening, but something in the air had changed. The pretense was over, the mask had slipped, and everyone present had just seen a glimpse of what Hannah Foster really was. Don't, she said quietly, the single word carrying more weight than any shouted threat could have. Just Don't. Anderson stumbled backward, his hand unconsciously moving to where her strike would have landed. Around them, 30 recruits had their phones out, recording everything. This would be all over social media within minutes, viral within hours. It was Gray who spotted it first, his sharp intake of breath drawing everyone's attention. In the brief scuffle, Hannah's t-shirt had been pulled askew, revealing her right shoulder, and there, partially visible but unmistakable to anyone who knew what to look for, was the edge of a tattoo. Black ink against pale skin, military precise in its execution. "Is that?" Gray started, then stopped, unable to voice what he was seeing. Hannah glanced down, saw what was visible, and for the first time that morning, her composure cracked slightly. She adjusted her shirt, but it was too late. Logan Foster had seen it too, and his military knowledge filled in the blanks. "Ghost Team 7, he breathed, the words carrying across the silent training ground like a gunshot. "That's the Ghost Team 7 insignia." The reaction was immediate and visceral. Ghost Team 7 was legend, myth, the kind of unit whose existence was officially denied even as their exploits were whispered about in barracks across the world. They were the shadows that struck from nowhere, the invisible hand that eliminated threats before they materialized. And they had supposedly been wiped out in Operation Crimson Dawn. Supposedly. "That's impossible," Anderson said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Ghost Team 7 had no survivors. No confirmed survivors," Hannah corrected quietly, and the weight of those words hit everyone like a physical blow. "There's a difference." Before anyone could respond, before the implications could fully sink in, a black SUV pulled up to the training ground with the smooth precision of a vehicle on urgent business. The door opened, and Commandant Samuel Fletcher stepped out, the Commandant of Camp Pendleton, a man who oversaw 38,000 Marines and never involved himself in routine training operations. He was here, in person, his dress blues immaculate despite the early hour, his presence immediately changing the entire dynamic of the situation. Everyone except Hannah snapped it to attention. As a civilian contractor, she wasn't required to, but something in her posture shifted subtly, an unconscious straightening that spoke of deeply ingrained military bearing that no amount of civilian life could fully erase. Fletcher's eyes swept the scene, taking in the frozen recruits, the shocked instructors, and the small woman in maintenance coveralls standing at the center of it all. His gaze lingered on Hannah, and something passed between them, a communication that needed no words. "At ease," Fletcher commanded, his voice carrying the authority of 30 years of military service. The Marines relaxed fractionally, though the tension remained palpable. Fletcher walked directly to Hannah, stopping 3 feet away. The morning sun caught the ribbons on his chest, row upon row of commendations, that told the story of a career spent in combat zones most Americans couldn't pronounce. But it was the look in his eyes that held everyone's attention, a mixture of recognition, respect, and something that looked almost like reverence. "Ms. Foster," Fletcher said formally, though something in his tone suggested deeper meaning. "I understand there's been an incident." "A disagreement about safety protocols, sir," Hannah replied, her voice neutral. "Nothing that can't be resolved." Fletcher's gaze moved to Anderson, and his expression hardened perceptibly. "Sergeant Anderson, did you put your hands on this woman?" Anderson's mouth opened and closed without sound, his face cycling through colors like a malfunctioning traffic light. "Sir, I may have reached for her arm, but—" "Yes or no, Sergeant?" "Yes, sir." Fletcher turned back to Hannah. "Did you wish to file a complaint?" "No, sir." Hannah's response was immediate. Sergeant Anderson was passionate about his training methods. No harm was done. Fletcher studied her for a long moment, and in that silence, everyone present could feel the weight of unspoken history. There was something here, some connection that went beyond the normal relationship between a base commander and a maintenance worker. "Walk with me, Ms. Foster," Fletcher said. It wasn't a request. Hannah fell into step beside him, and as they moved away from the group, every eye tracked their movement. They walked with matching stride lengths, the unconscious synchronization of people who had marched together before. Fletcher leaned in slightly, saying something too quiet for anyone else to hear. Hannah's response was equally inaudible, but Fletcher nodded and, in a gesture that left everyone speechless, briefly placed his hand on her shoulder. It was a touch of familiarity, of respect, of something that looked almost like gratitude. Anderson turned to Carter, his face twisted with confusion and growing dread. "What the hell is happening?" Carter was still staring at his phone, cross-referencing what he had found with what they'd just witnessed. Hannah Foster, Master Sergeant Hannah Foster. Silver Star, Navy Cross, 3 bronze stars with valor. He looked up, his face pale. She's not just Ghost Team 7. She was their leader. The team leader survived? Coleman's voice cracked. How is that possible? Maybe, Hughes said slowly, the full implications beginning to dawn on him. Maybe she's the reason any of us are still alive. Meanwhile, Fletcher and Hannah had stopped near the equipment storage area, far enough away for private conversation, but still visible to the watching crowd. Helmand Province, Fletcher said quietly, August 15th, 2013, 0200 hours. Hannah's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes shifted, focusing on a memory that lived just beneath the surface of every waking moment. My convoy had been hit, Fletcher continued. Multiple IEDs. We had 4 dead, 8 wounded, and more Taliban fighters than we could count closing in. Air support was 40 minutes out. We put out a call for any available assistance. He paused, his professional composure cracking slightly. Ghost Team 7 answered. It was our job, sir. Your job was to complete your own mission 50 kilometers away. You chose to divert. 7 operators against a force of over 60. In 18 minutes, you had cleared the area and established a secure LZ for medevac. Fletcher's voice grew thick with emotion. You personally pulled me out from under an overturned MRAP. I was bleeding out, had maybe minutes left. You kept me alive while coordinating your team's defense of our position. Hannah remained silent, but her eyes had taken on a distant quality, seeing not the sunny California morning, but a very different scene. Darkness, fire, the copper smell of blood and the acrid smoke of burning vehicles. 12 Marines went home because of you, Fletcher said. 12 families didn't get that knock on the door. And 11 did, Hannah replied quietly. 11 families got folded flags instead of homecomings. Fletcher studied her face. Operation Crimson Dawn. What really happened? The question hung between them like a challenge. Hannah was quiet for a long moment, her gaze moving across the base, seeing but not seeing the recruits, the instructors, the routine morning operations of a military installation at peace. We were betrayed, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. Someone sold our position for money. 11 good Marines died because someone in our own command structure decided their lives were worth less than a payday. Fletcher's face darkened. Who? Does it matter? They're beyond justice now. Hannah, sir, with all due respect, I came here to disappear, to do simple work that helps people without anyone knowing who I am or what I've done. This morning has complicated that, but it doesn't change what I want. Fletcher was about to respond when his aide, Lieutenant Colonel Isaac Warren, appeared, moving with the controlled urgency of someone bearing important news. Sir, we have a situation, Warren said, slightly out of breath. The video from this morning has gone viral. Over 3 million views already. Someone has identified Ms. Foster. Fletcher cursed under his breath. How much do they know? Enough. They're calling her the Ghost of Pendleton. Media is already gathering at the main gate. Hannah actually laughed, though there was no humor in it. The Ghost of Pendleton. How poetic. Sir, Warren continued, there's more. We've received multiple calls from Pentagon officials. The Secretary of Defense wants a full briefing on why a decorated Special Operations veteran is working maintenance. And there's another issue, Warren added, his voice dropping. 3 black SUVs just arrived at the main gate. Diplomatic plates. They're from Blackstone Defense Solutions. The name hit Hannah like a physical blow. Her entire body went rigid, fight-or-flight responses flooding her system with adrenaline. Blackstone, the private military contractor that had absorbed so many former Special Operations personnel. The company that paid 3 times military salary for people willing to forget their oaths. The company run by Colonel James Harrison, retired. Fletcher noticed her reaction immediately. Hannah, what is it? Colonel Harrison was our liaison with JSOC during Crimson Dawn, Hannah said, her voice flat and dangerous. He provided the intelligence that sent us into that valley. You're saying, I'm saying that 2 weeks after my team was killed, Harrison retired with full benefits and immediately took a senior position with Blackstone. Her hands had clenched into fists. Draw your own conclusions. Fletcher's face went red with rage. Warren, alert base security. Those vehicles don't get through the gate without my explicit authorization. Yes, sir. As Warren hurried off, Fletcher turned back to Hannah. If Harrison is here, he knows I'm alive, Hannah finished. The video would have triggered alerts. He's here to tie up loose ends. Not on my base. Hannah's phone, not her official one, but an encrypted device she'd carried for 2 years, buzzed with an incoming call. Unknown number. She looked at Fletcher, who nodded, then answered. Foster. Hello, Ghost. The voice was smooth, cultured, and familiar. I heard you gave quite a performance this morning. Harrison. The name came out like a curse. Now, is that any way to greet an old friend? I'm here to make you an offer. Not interested. You haven't heard it yet. Blackstone could use someone with your skills. Name your price. 7 figures to start. My team's lives. Can you give me those back? There was a pause. That was unfortunate. Bad intelligence happens in war. It wasn't bad intelligence. It was fabricated. You sent us to die. That's a serious accusation. It's the truth. Harrison's voice hardened. Truth is subjective, Foster. What's objective is that you're alive, and you have skills that are being wasted checking equipment. Come work for us. Help train the next generation. The next generation of what? Mercenaries who sell out their brothers for money? Careful, Foster. You're alone now. No team, no backup, no support. Accidents happen, even on secure military bases. Hannah actually smiled, cold and predatory. Is that a threat, Colonel? It's an observation about the dangerous nature of your work. All that climbing, all that equipment, so many ways for things to go wrong. Harrison, Hannah said, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. If you come near me or anyone on this base, I will end you. That's not a threat. That's a promise from the only ghost who made it out of that valley. She ended the call and looked at Fletcher. He's not going away. Then neither are we. Fletcher pulled out his phone. I'm calling NCIS. If Harrison was involved in the death of American service members, you can't prove anything, Hannah interrupted. I've tried for 2 years. The trail is too cold, the evidence too circumstantial. Before Fletcher could respond, Anderson and the other instructors approached hesitantly. They had been released from their positions, but clearly didn't know how to process what they had witnessed. Sir, Anderson said, his voice carefully controlled. The recruits, they're asking questions. What do we tell them? Fletcher looked at Hannah, who shrugged slightly. The secret was out anyway. Tell them the truth, Fletcher said. They witnessed something extraordinary today. Master Sergeant Hannah Foster, one of the most decorated Marines in MARSOC history, has been serving this base in her own way, ensuring their safety through meticulous equipment inspection. Anderson looked at Hannah with something approaching awe. Master Sergeant, ma'am, I'm so sorry. If I had known... You couldn't have known, Hannah cut him off. That was the point. Logan Foster pushed forward from the group of recruits that had crept closer. Ma'am, Ghost Team 7, my brother, you saved them. Hannah looked at the young Marine, seeing in him the same idealism and dedication that had once driven her to volunteer for the most dangerous missions. Your brother saved himself, Private. I just provided cover fire. He said Ghost Team came out of nowhere, 7 operators against impossible odds. He said you held the perimeter for 18 minutes until medevac arrived. We did our job. You did more than that, Fletcher interjected. You did the impossible. The sound of approaching vehicles interrupted the conversation. Not the black SUVs from Blackstone, but military vehicles, a lot of them. Hannah counted at least 6 Humvees plus support vehicles, all bearing Pentagon markings. What now? She muttered. The lead vehicle stopped, and a figure in civilian clothes stepped out. Hannah recognized him immediately, Director Marcus Webb, Defense Intelligence Agency. They had crossed paths before, in places that didn't officially exist, conducting operations that would never be acknowledged. Master Sergeant Foster, Webb said as he approached, we need to talk. I'm retired, Director. No, you're not. You're on extended administrative leave pending investigation into Operation Crimson Dawn. An investigation that was never completed because you were listed as MIA, presumed KIA. Hannah felt the walls closing in. 2 years of hiding, of simple work and quiet purpose, crumbling in a single morning. What do you want? Harrison, we've been building a case, but we need someone who was there. Someone who survived. I've told everyone who would listen. No one wanted to hear it. That was before we had evidence of his financial transactions. Deposits that match timeline with several compromised operations. Crimson Dawn was just one of many. The implications hit everyone present like a shockwave. This wasn't just about Ghost Team 7. This was about systematic betrayal. American forces sold out for profit over years. How many? Hannah asked, her voice deadly quiet. At least 6 operations that we can confirm. 43 American casualties total. 43. The number hung in the air like an accusation. Hannah had thought she was carrying the weight of 11 deaths. Now that weight had quadrupled. Where is he now? Still at the gate, demanding entry. He knows we can't arrest him without concrete evidence linking him to the intelligence leaks. Hannah looked at the faces around her. Fletcher's righteous anger, Anderson's dawning horror, the recruit's confused admiration. Then she looked at Webb. You want me to get you that evidence? You're the only one who can. You were there. You know the timeline, the players, the details that only someone on the ground would know. And if I do this, then 43 families get justice, and you get to disappear again if that's what you want. Hannah was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. The simple life she'd built was already destroyed. The question now was whether she would use that destruction for purpose or let it be meaningless. I'll need access to classified files. Done. And protection for the base. Harrison doesn't make idle threats. Already in motion, this base is now under direct Pentagon oversight. Hannah nodded slowly. Give me 24 hours. You'll have whatever you need. As Webb returned to coordinate with his team, Anderson approached Hannah again. Ma'am, is there anything we can do? Hannah looked at him, then at the obstacle course, then at the recruit still watching everything with wide eyes. Yes, replace that rope on the 20-foot wall. It really will fail within 48 hours. Anderson actually laughed, tension breaking for just a moment. Yes, ma'am, immediately. And Sergeant, Hannah added, that recruit, Adam Fox, he has a slight favoring of his left ankle, probably an old injury he didn't report. Watch him on the runs, push too hard, and he'll re-injure it. How could you possibly know that? Because watching people, really seeing them, keeping them safe, that's what I do now. The rest of the morning passed in a blur of activity. NCIS agents arrived to secure the base. Media gathered at the gates like vultures scenting blood. The Pentagon officials set up a temporary command post, and through it all, Hannah continued her equipment inspections, methodically checking every piece of gear the recruits would use. At noon, she was examining rappelling gear when Logan Foster approached again. Ma'am, can I ask you something? Hannah nodded without looking up from the carabiner she was inspecting. Why maintenance? After everything you've done, everything you've been through, why this? Hannah held up the carabiner. See this? There's a hairline crack in the metal, invisible, unless you know what to look for. Under normal load, it would hold. But if someone fell and it had to take sudden impact, it would shatter. She set it aside, tagged for disposal. I've seen enough people die from things that couldn't be prevented. Now I prevent the ones that can be. But you could be training us, teaching us. The last people I trained are dead, Private. The words came out harsher than she intended. She softened her tone. Every decision I made, every lesson I taught, wasn't enough to save them. I won't take that responsibility again. Logan was quiet for a moment. My brother says survivor's guilt is the hardest enemy to fight. Hannah looked at him sharply. Your brother's smart. He also says the best way to honor the fallen is to keep serving, just in different ways. Before Hannah could respond, her encrypted phone buzzed. She looked at the screen and her face went pale. I have to go, she said abruptly, leaving Logan standing confused as she moved quickly toward the command post. She found Webb surrounded by intelligence analysts and computer screens. We have a problem, she said. What kind of problem? Hannah showed him her phone. The message was simple. Check your email. A friend. Webb immediately had one of his technicians pull up a secure terminal. The email was there, sent from an anonymous server containing a single video file. Play it, Hannah said, though her voice suggested she already knew what they would see. The video was grainy, obviously taken from a hidden camera, but the audio was clear. It showed Harrison in what looked like a private office, talking on a satellite phone. The intelligence package is ready, Harrison's voice said. Ghost Team 7 will receive it within the hour. They'll insert at the coordinates provided. A pause. Yes, I understand the payment terms. $3 million upon confirmation of elimination. The room went absolutely silent. This was it. Proof. Evidence of treason at the highest level. Where did this come from? Webb demanded. Hannah was studying the video, noting angles, lighting, background details. That's Harrison's office at Bagram. This was taken 2 days before Crimson Dawn. But who took it? A new message appeared on Hannah's phone. Check the gate. Fletcher immediately called security. What's happening at the main gate? Sir, the Blackstone vehicles are leaving, but someone got out first. They're asking for Hannah Foster. Hannah was already moving, Webb and Fletcher following. At the gate, standing alone with a single duffel bag, was someone Hannah never thought she'd see again. Marcus Harrison, Colonel Harrison's son. Lieutenant Marcus Harrison, military intelligence, stationed at Pendleton. But the young officer who stood there looked nothing like the confident intelligence operative he was supposed to be. He looked broken, haunted, carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. Lieutenant Harrison, Hannah said carefully, Master Sergeant Foster. His voice was rough, like he'd been crying. I sent you the video. The confession landed like a bomb. Everyone stared at the young man who had just betrayed his own father. Why? Hannah asked. Because I finally learned the truth about Crimson Dawn, about what he did. Marcus's composure cracked. My whole life I idolized him, wanted to be just like him. Then I found that video while organizing his files. I've been carrying it for 6 months, not knowing what to do. What changed? I saw the footage this morning, you on the obstacle course. I recognized you from photos my father kept hidden, photos of Ghost Team 7. Tears were running down his face now. He had pictures of all of them, like trophies. 11 Marines he sold out for money. Webb stepped forward. Lieutenant, you understand what you're doing? This will destroy your father. He destroyed himself the moment he betrayed his oath. Marcus straightened, finding some reserve of strength. I'm a Marine officer. My duty is to the Corps, not to family. Hannah studied the young man who looked so much like his father, but had somehow found the moral courage Harrison never possessed. The other files. Are there more? Marcus held out a flash drive. Everything. 6 operations, financial records, contact lists, everyone involved in his network. Webb took the drive like it was made of gold. This will bring down the entire conspiracy. Ma'am, Marcus addressed Hannah directly, I know it doesn't mean anything, but I'm sorry for what he did, for your team. Hannah was quiet for a long moment. Then she did something no one expected. She stepped forward and placed her hand on Marcus's shoulder. You're not responsible for your father's crimes, Lieutenant. You've shown more courage today than he ever had. The young man broke down completely, and Hannah let him cry, standing there as witness to the destruction of everything he'd believed about his family. Within an hour, Harrison was arrested at his hotel. The evidence was overwhelming, irrefutable. The trial would be a formality. Justice, delayed by 2 years, was finally coming for Ghost Team 7. As the sun began to set over Camp Pendleton, Hannah stood once again at the obstacle course. The rope had been replaced as she'd requested. All the safety issues had been addressed. The recruits would train safely tomorrow. Anderson approached, maintaining a respectful distance. Ma'am, the Commandant wanted me to tell you that your position here is secure. You can continue your maintenance work as long as you want. Hannah nodded, not turning around. Also, Anderson continued, the recruits wanted to do something, for you, for Ghost Team 7. Hannah turned to see all 30 recruits from the morning forming up in precise formation. Logan Foster stood at the front. Master Sergeant Foster, Logan called out formally, we request permission to honor the fallen of Ghost Team 7. Hannah's throat tightened. Granted. In perfect unison, 30 Marines rendered a salute. Not required, not regulation, but absolutely genuine. They held it for 11 seconds, one for each fallen ghost. When they finished, Hannah returned the salute, crisp and precise. Carry on, Marines. As the recruits dispersed, Fletcher appeared beside her. So, what now? Now I finish my shift. Equipment doesn't inspect itself. That's it? Harrison's going to prison, the conspiracy is unraveling, and you just want to go back to checking ropes? Hannah looked at him. You know what I've learned, sir? Heroes aren't the ones who do the impossible things. Heroes are the ones who do the necessary things, every day, without recognition. Your supply sergeants who make sure ammunition arrives on time. Your medics who prevent diseases before they spread. Your maintenance workers who ensure equipment doesn't fail. She picked up her clipboard, preparing to continue her rounds. I've been the other kind of hero, she continued. The kind they write stories about. It cost me everything. Now I'm trying the quiet kind of heroism, the kind that makes sure everyone goes home safe at the end of the day. Fletcher nodded slowly. The base is lucky to have you, Hannah, in whatever capacity you choose. As she walked away to continue her inspections, her encrypted phone buzzed one more time. She looked at the message and stopped it in her tracks. MARSOC Priority 1, Operational Necessity, Reactivation Authorized, Await Contact. She stared at the screen for a long moment. Ghost Team 7 was gone, but apparently the military had other plans for their sole survivor. She deleted the message and continued her inspection. They could wait. The recruit's safety couldn't. That evening, as Hannah prepared to leave the base, she found a package waiting at her truck. No return address, but inside were 11 challenge coins. Ghost Team 7's coins, recovered from Harrison's trophy collection. She held them up to the fading light, reading each name engraved on the back. Rodriguez, Chen, Williams, Patterson, Reeves, Mitchell, Thompson, Garcia, Anderson, Kim, Jackson, her team, her family, her ghosts. She drove to a quiet overlook that faced the ocean, where she could see the sun setting over the Pacific. One by one, she threw the coins into the sea, returning them to the vast silence where warriors' spirits finally found peace. All except one. Jessica Reeves's coin she kept, a reminder of the promise she'd made and kept. When she returned to her small apartment that night, she found another message waiting. This time, it was a video call request. She accepted it. General Morrison, MARSOC Command, appeared on screen. Master Sergeant Foster, General, you've had quite a day. It's been eventful, sir. Harrison's arrest changes things. His network had connections we're only beginning to understand. We need someone who understands how they operated. I'm retired, General. You're on extended leave. There's a difference. Hannah was quiet for a moment. What are you asking? 48 hours. Come to Quantico. Help us understand what we're dealing with. Then you can return to your maintenance job. And if I refuse, then you refuse. But 43 families deserve to know the full truth about how their loved ones died. The weight of duty settled on Hannah's shoulders like an old, familiar burden. She had thought she was done with this world, but it seemed the world wasn't done with her. 48 hours, she agreed. Transport will arrive at 0600. After the call ended, Hannah sat in the darkness of her apartment, thinking about the day's events. In 12 hours, she had gone from anonymous maintenance worker to exposed special operations legend. Her carefully constructed hiding place had been destroyed. But maybe that was necessary. Maybe some ghosts weren't meant to stay hidden. Maybe they were meant to stand in the light, if only briefly, to remind others that heroes walked among them in the most unexpected places. Her phone rang, regular phone this time. She recognized the number. Anderson. Ma'am, I'm sorry to bother you, but I had to ask. This morning you said the last people you trained are dead, but that's not entirely true, is it? Hannah was quiet. The 12 Marines in Afghanistan. My brother was one of them. You trained him during joint operations 2 months before Helmand. He credits that training with saving his life a dozen times since. What's your point, Sergeant? My point is that your teaching, your influence, it ripples outward. Those 11 Ghost Team members, they're gone. But the hundreds of people they trained, the thousands they saved, they're still here, still serving, still passing on what they learned. Hannah felt something crack in her chest, a wall she'd built around her heart starting to crumble. Think about it, ma'am. Every recruit who watched you today learned something about assumptions, about respect, about what real strength looks like. That's training too. After Anderson hung up, Hannah stood at her window, looking out at the lights of Camp Pendleton in the distance. Tomorrow she would fly to Quantico. In 48 hours, she might be back. Or she might be pulled back into the shadow world she'd tried to leave behind. But tonight, she had a different mission. She opened her laptop and began typing. A manual, not classified tactics or special operations techniques, but something simpler. Equipment inspection protocols, how to spot metal fatigue, how to identify UV damage in ropes, how to prevent the preventable deaths that claimed more lives than combat. She would leave it for Anderson to find, to share with the recruits. Her knowledge, preserved and passed on, even if she never returned. Because Hannah Foster had learned something important in her 2 years of hiding. Being a warrior wasn't about the battles you fought. It was about the lives you protected. Whether that protection came from a rifle or a clipboard didn't matter. What mattered was that someone stood watch. Someone cared enough to check the ropes, test the equipment, spot the dangers others missed. Someone ensured that today, everyone went home. As she typed, her phone displayed one final message from an unknown number. The ghosts of Ghost Team 7 rest easier tonight. Justice comes. Thank you. A grateful nation. Hannah deleted the message and continued typing. There would be time for ghosts and justice tomorrow. Tonight, she had a manual to finish. Knowledge to preserve. Lives to save. The ghost of Ghost Team 7 had been revealed, but Hannah Foster, maintenance worker, equipment inspector, quiet guardian of safety, would endure, because that's what warriors did. They adapted. They evolved. They found new ways to serve. And sometimes, just sometimes, they found peace in the simple act of ensuring that a rope wouldn't break, that a carabiner would hold, that tomorrow's heroes would have the equipment they needed to come home. The story that had begun with a simple safety inspection had revealed a truth that would ripple through Camp Pendleton for years to come. Heroes weren't always visible. They weren't always recognized, but they were always there, standing watch, keeping others safe, honoring the fallen by protecting the living. Hannah Foster had shown them all what that looked like, and Camp Pendleton would never forget. The transport to Quantico departed at exactly 0600 hours, just as General Morrison had promised. Hannah sat alone in the back of the C-130, her duffel bag containing everything she owned that mattered, which wasn't much. The manual she'd written for Anderson had been left on his desk, along with a note explaining the critical inspection points that could mean the difference between life and death. But as the aircraft climbed into the morning sky, Hannah's encrypted phone buzzed with an incoming file transfer. No sender ID, just a timestamp and a single word: urgent. She opened it cautiously, years of operational security making her paranoid even on a secure military flight. The file contained a single photograph, grainy and obviously taken from a distance, but what it showed made her blood run cold. It was a picture of a memorial service, military, based on the uniforms. The timestamp showed it was taken 3 days ago, but that wasn't what stopped her heart. In the crowd of mourners standing at the very back, partially obscured by shadow, was a figure that shouldn't exist. Jessica Reeves, Lance Corporal Jessica Reeves, Ghost Team 7, KIA, October 15th, 2014. The Marine who had died in Hannah's arms in that Afghan valley, whose blood had soaked into Hannah's uniform, whose last words had been about protecting the new recruits. But the woman in the photograph had Jessica's face, her posture, even the way she held her hands clasped in front of her. A quirk Jessica had picked up from her grandmother's funeral when she was 12, something she'd told Hannah about during a long night on watch. Hannah's hands shook as she zoomed in on the image. The resolution was too poor to be certain, but every instinct screamed that this was impossible. She had held Jessica as she died, had felt her last breath, had closed her eyes. Another message appeared. Building 7, Quantico, come alone. We have much to discuss. J.R. J.R. Jessica Reeves. Hannah's mind raced through possibilities. An imposter? Someone who knew enough about Ghost Team 7 to impersonate a dead Marine? But who would know such intimate details? And why reveal themselves now, just as Harrison's network was being dismantled? The flight to Quantico took 3 hours. Hannah spent every minute analyzing the photograph, looking for signs of manipulation, evidence of digital tampering. But the metadata was clean, the shadows consistent, the image authentic as far as she could tell. When they landed, General Morrison was waiting on the tarmac with a full security detail. Master Sergeant Foster, welcome back to... General, I need to check something first, Hannah interrupted, something she would never have done under normal circumstances. Building 7, is it still operational? Morrison's expression shifted. Building 7 was decommissioned 18 months ago. It's scheduled for demolition next month. Why do you ask? Hannah showed him the message but not the photograph. Not yet. She needed to understand what was happening first. Someone wants to meet me there. That's not possible. The building is sealed. Has been since... Morrison trailed off, his face going pale. Since the Ghost Team 7 debriefing facility was relocated. The Ghost Team 7 debriefing facility, where Hannah had spent 3 months after her extraction from Afghanistan, being interrogated about every detail of Operation Crimson Dawn, where she had identified her team's bodies, where she had been shown the photographs of 11 flag-draped coffins. I need to go there, General. Not alone, you don't. The message was specific. I go alone, or they don't show. Morrison studied her face. This could be a trap. Harrison might have contingencies we don't know about. Harrison's in federal custody. His network isn't. Hannah knew he was right, but something deeper than logic was driving her. The possibility, however remote, that Jessica might be alive changed everything. "Give me 1 hour," Hannah negotiated. "If I don't check in, send everyone." Morrison clearly wanted to refuse, but something in Hannah's expression stopped him. 1 hour. And you wear a tracker. Hannah agreed, though she suspected whoever was waiting would detect and disable any surveillance device within minutes. 30 minutes later, she stood outside Building 7, a nondescript concrete structure that looked abandoned from the outside. The door that should have been sealed was slightly ajar. She pushed it open and stepped into darkness. Emergency lighting flickered on, illuminating a hallway she remembered too well. The debriefing rooms where she had recounted every detail of Crimson Dawn dozens of times. The medical facility where doctors had treated her injuries while psychologists probed her mental state. The viewing room where she had identified her team. "Hello, Ghost." The voice came from behind her, and Hannah spun, her hand reaching for a weapon she wasn't carrying. Standing in the shadows at the end of the hallway was a figure in military fatigues, face obscured by tactical gear. "Who are you?" The figure stepped forward, removing the tactical helmet, and Hannah's world tilted off its axis. Jessica Reeves stood before her, scarred but alive, older but unmistakable. The same green eyes, the same crooked smile that had made her the team's morale officer, the same small scar on her chin from a training accident at Paris Island. "It's really me, Hannah." "No." The word came out as barely a whisper. "I watched you die. I held you. You bled out in my arms. You held someone who looked like me, someone who was dying, but it wasn't me." Jessica stepped closer, and Hannah could see the pain in her eyes. "I've wanted to tell you for 2 years. Every day, I wanted to reach out, but I couldn't, not until now." "Explain." Hannah's voice was ice, even as her heart hammered in her chest. Jessica sat down on a dust-covered bench, suddenly looking exhausted. Crimson Dawn wasn't just compromised by Harrison. It was designed to fail from the beginning. But not by our enemies, by our own people. "What are you talking about?" "There's a group within the intelligence community. They call themselves the Prometheus Project. They have been conducting unauthorized operations for years, using special operations teams as unwitting test subjects." Hannah's mind reeled. Test subjects for what? Survival, adaptation, evolution. Jessica pulled out a tablet, showing classified documents that shouldn't exist. They wanted to see what happened when elite operators were pushed beyond their limits, how many would survive impossible scenarios, what they would become. And Ghost Team 7? We were selected specifically. 12 operators with unique psychological profiles, exceptional skills, specific genetic markers. They sent us into that valley knowing it was a trap, wanting to see who would survive and how. Hannah felt sick. 11 people died for an experiment? 10, Jessica corrected. Rodriguez survived too. He's been in deep cover in Eastern Europe, tracking Prometheus operations there. And 2 other ghosts were alive. Hannah's legs gave out, and she sat heavily on the floor, her entire worldview crumbling. "Why didn't you contact me? Why let me think I was alone?" "Because you were being watched. Every moment, every decision, every action. They wanted to see what you would do with your survival. Would you seek revenge? Would you break? Would you evolve? And maintenance work at Pendleton?" Jessica actually laughed, though it was bitter. "That wasn't part of their plan. You were supposed to either self-destruct or return to active duty within 6 months. Instead, you found a third option. You chose service without glory, protection without violence. You became something they didn't expect. So why reveal this now? Because Harrison wasn't working for who you think he was working for. Yes, he took money from foreign sources, but he was ultimately answering to Prometheus. His arrest has triggered contingencies. They're accelerating their timeline." "Timeline for what?" Jessica stood, pacing the dusty room with the restless energy Hannah remembered from mission planning sessions. "Something called Operation Lazarus. They're planning to activate all the survivors from their various experiments. Dozens of operators who've been through manufactured crises, who've been transformed by extreme survival situations. Activate them for what? We don't know. But whatever it is, it's big enough that they're willing to burn decades of cover to make it happen." Hannah's encrypted phone buzzed, Morrison checking in. She had 10 minutes before her hour was up. Why should I believe any of this? Jessica reached into her pocket and pulled out a challenge coin. Ghost Team 7's coin, but different from the ones Hannah had thrown into the ocean. This one had additional markings, coordinates etched into the back. Because at those coordinates, you'll find proof. Documents, recordings, evidence of every operation Prometheus has conducted. Rodriguez and I have been gathering it for 2 years. And what do you expect me to do with it? What you've always done. The right thing. Jessica moved toward the exit. Harrison's arrest was just the beginning. The real enemy is still out there, still operational, still using American soldiers as laboratory rats. Wait, Hannah called out. If you're alive, if Rodriguez is alive, who died in that valley? Jessica turned back, her face shadowed with grief. They were still our brothers, Hannah. Ghost Team 7 was real. Our bonds were real. But 3 of the bodies were operators from other units, already dead, placed there to complete the narrative. The truth is even worse than we thought. Prometheus has been harvesting America's best warriors for 20 years. Hannah's phone buzzed again. 5 minutes. I have to go, Hannah said. Morrison will send a team soon. I won't be here. Jessica handed her a burner phone. When you're ready to know the truth, all of it, call the only number programmed in there. But Hannah, once you make that call, there's no going back. You'll be choosing a side in a war that most people don't even know exists. And if I don't call, then go back to Pendleton. Check your ropes. Save lives in small ways. Maybe that's enough. Jessica paused at the door. But we both know you won't do that. Not now, not knowing what you know. She disappeared into the darkness of the building, and Hannah heard a door close somewhere in the distance. When she tried to follow, the corridor Jessica had taken was empty, with no sign anyone had been there at all. Hannah emerged from Building 7 just as Morrison's security team was approaching. She showed them the empty building, claimed the meeting had been a false lead, someone trying to capitalize on the chaos of Harrison's arrest. But in her pocket, the burner phone felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. The next 48 hours at Quantico passed in a blur. Hannah provided intelligence about Harrison's network, helped decrypt communications, identified patterns in the compromised operations. But her mind kept returning to Jessica's words, to the impossibility of Ghost Team 7 members being alive, to the implications of Prometheus. When her obligation was complete, General Morrison offered her a position with MARSOC Intelligence. Your insights have been invaluable. We could use someone with your experience full-time. I need to think about it, sir. Of course. Take all the time you need. But as Hannah boarded the transport back to California, she already knew her decision was made. Not the one Morrison expected, though. She pulled out the burner phone, staring at the single contact labeled simply Lazarus. As Camp Pendleton came into view below, Hannah saw Anderson on the obstacle course with new recruits, implementing the safety protocols from her manual. The rope on the 20-foot wall had been replaced. Lives would be saved because of those simple actions. But across the world, American operators were potentially being manipulated, sacrificed, experimented upon by their own government. The scope of the conspiracy Jessica had revealed dwarfed Harrison's betrayal. Her regular phone rang. Anderson. Ma'am, you're back. How was Quantico? Educational, Sergeant. Listen, I wanted to tell you, we've implemented all your protocols. 0 accidents in the past 3 days. The recruits are calling it the Foster Standard. Despite everything, Hannah smiled. Just keep them safe, Anderson. Yes, ma'am. Oh, and Foster? Logan Foster, he wanted me to tell you something. He said his brother's unit is being deployed somewhere classified. He wanted to thank you again, in case they don't come back. Hannah's blood ran cold. A classified deployment. Right after Harrison's arrest. Right when Prometheus would be looking to clean up loose ends. Anderson, what unit is Logan's brother in? The 2-7, I think. Why? The same unit that Ghost Team 7 had saved in Afghanistan. The unit that could identify Hannah, that new Ghost Team existed. They were being removed from the board. Hannah ended the call and immediately dialed the number on the burner phone. Jessica answered on the first ring. I knew you'd call. They're deploying the 2-7. We know. Rodriguez is already moving to intercept. But, Hannah, if you're in all the way. Hannah looked at Camp Pendleton below, at the life she'd built, at the simple purpose she had found. Then she thought about Logan Foster, about his brother's unit, about all the operators who didn't know they were pawns in someone else's game. I'm in. Then welcome to the real war, Ghost. The one where the enemy wears our own uniform and the battlefield is everywhere and nowhere at once. The transport touched down at Pendleton, but Hannah knew she wouldn't be staying long. Her war wasn't over. It had just revealed itself to be something far more complex than she'd ever imagined. As she walked across the tarmac, her encrypted phone displayed one final message: origin unknown. The ghost becomes the hunter, Prometheus awakens, the dead rise, the game begins anew. Welcome back to the shadows, Master Sergeant Foster. We've been waiting. Hannah deleted the message, but the chill it sent down her spine remained. Ghost Team 7's war hadn't ended in that Afghan valley. It had only been the opening move in a game whose rules she was just beginning to understand. Behind her, Camp Pendleton continued its daily routine, unaware that their maintenance worker had just become a soldier in a shadow war that would determine the fate of America's Special Operations Forces. The ghost was no longer hiding. The hunt had begun. Hannah Foster's story is not just about an elite female warrior hiding in the shadows. It's a profound reminder that true heroes don't always wear gleaming ranks or receive standing ovations. They might be the person quietly checking ropes each morning, the one maintaining equipment to ensure others' safety. Hannah teaches us that service takes many forms. After losing 11 teammates, she could have chosen revenge or self-destruction. Instead, she chose humble service, protecting lives through work that seemed small but was essential. Every rope inspected, every defect detected, was a life saved. Never judge people by their appearance or current position. The maintenance woman you dismiss might be someone who once saved hundreds of lives. Respect isn't reserved for rank. It belongs to all who serve with integrity. But Hannah's story also warns us about darker truths. Sometimes the greatest threats come from within our own systems. The revelation about Prometheus Project shows that vigilance must extend beyond external enemies. We must question, verify, and protect those who serve from exploitation by those who would use their dedication for twisted purposes.